Distance Education. This is NBV3E, the grade 11 Native Studies course, and it's Beliefs, Values, and Aspirations of Aboriginal Peoples in Contemporary Society. I'm Pete, and I'm your teacher. So this is week 3, and this is our 4th class in week 3, so we're moving right along. We're really, after this class, we're going to be 1/3 of the way through the course, so that's pretty good. And today we're going to look at lesson 8, and it's about roles and responsibilities. But before we get into that, I kind of closed off yesterday just when we were getting to the key questions. So I thought I'd take a couple of moments to look over the key questions for lesson 7. So this is on page 12 of your unit 2. Now, when you're looking at these key questions, what I'd like to suggest is that you look at the textbook, that and if you don't have the textbook, you'll have to look at the pages that I post on my Facebook, PW Space Awasa. So, but look at the textbook. It is a good idea to try and get a hold of that. Ask the DEC for it, and read through the information. We don't cover everything in class. We just don't have time. And so, I'm trying to present the highlights. So for the key questions, it may help you to go through and see if there's some information that may help you in the textbook. It probably is. So for the key questions for lesson 7, there's only 3 key questions, but they're asking you to do this activity. So this is for 10 marks here, the first one. And it says, read and develop a response to the following quotation. Consider identity by choice, identity by law, and nations defining identity. Okay, so in 2010, Assembly of First Nations National Chief Sean Atleo said, "It is fair and just that Indian status will be restored to those who lost it because of inequality in the Indian Act. But the real problem is the Indian Act itself. The Government of Canada should not be able to decide who is and who is not a First Nation citizen. It is not the right of any nation to identify its citizens, and First Nations are no exception. We are calling on the federal government to work with us on a broader approach that goes beyond these narrow amendments and deals with the real issues of First Nations citizenship." Okay, so what we're asking you to do then is read that and respond to it. Okay, and they're giving you some ideas to help you kind of steer your response. Identity by choice. So someone chooses to call himself a First Nation, right? Some people choose to call themselves Indian, right? Or somebody may choose to not refer to their Aboriginal status. Okay. Identity by law. Okay, so that is that the government decides, and the way it decides, depends on who your mother is, who your father is, where you were born, what percentage, of whatever race you have in your blood. I mean, the government can, pick and choose, and this has been done, in many different jurisdictions, not just in Canada, but it's been done in other places as well. And then nations defining identity. Okay, so that would be something like, a First Nation saying anyone born there is a First Nation. Okay, so that's what we're asking you to respond to. Now, nobody's saying you have to agree with this. Okay, and so feel free to be critical, feel free to be favorable, feel free to be neutral, or feel free to respond in maybe a different way. They're suggesting identity by choice, identity by law, and nations defining identity. Now, you'll be able to go and find some information about those ideas in the course text. Okay, I'll leave that up to you. Okay, so that's 10 marks. So, we're probably, I'm thinking maybe, making about 10 good points in your writing would probably be a good goal. Maybe you can't quite get there. Maybe you have 15 points you're going to make. Like I said, different activities resonate more with some people, or to put it another way, you'll find some of these activities you'll just really dig into them, and some of them you'll just want to get it over with. So I understand that. So just do your best on that, and just try to answer the question. Man, I can't tell you. It might be a couple of paragraphs probably. Personally, because it's a because it's 10 marks, it's a strange number of marks to, you know, I'd probably go for 3 paragraphs if I was writing that. Maybe an introductory paragraph, something in the middle, and then a sort of a summary paragraph. Okay, so now question 2, it says, how can sports and games contribute to your own identity? What sort of benefits do you gain through playing sports and games that help shape who you are and your sense of self? Okay, your sense of yourself. Sorry about that. Okay, so see, here's the thing. Um, you know, games that we all share as Canadians. And when I say Canadian, I mean everyone in Canada. Okay, First Nations people, new immigrants, people who've were born here, 5 generations back, everyone. Okay, so we have certain games that we play, soccer and I guess some people play football, hockey, of course, is considered a very quintessential Canadian game. But there are lots of games that Aboriginal people play that are unique, right? Well, lacrosse has kind of been picked up quite a bit. I mentioned playing lacrosse when I was young, and it's so that's a game. But there are all sorts of games that Aboriginal people play. And as a matter of fact, that's something when I lived up north that um, I saw some really unique games, and I also saw sort of a unique take on playing games and sport and things like that. So talk about that. And it's okay if you don't play any games at all that are unique to your community. That's okay. You can talk about that, right? You don't necessarily have to agree with it, and you don't necessarily have to, you know, um, talk about your community. You can talk about another community, or you could talk about the topic in general. So, and it's 4 marks, so a paragraph, good solid paragraph. You could probably pull off that question. And 3, it says, what are the positive contributions of sports and games to Aboriginal? Wait, is that the same? Maybe. What are the positive contributions of sports and games to Aboriginal people's sense of identity? Okay, so again, it's really similar, I guess. For question 2, it's a more of a personal thing, and then for question 3, it's more of a overall thing. So, if you wanted to, you could ask someone, or you could ask an elder, or you could ask someone who's kind of sporty, what do they get out of it? What do they think it does, right? If people can go to local competitions or something like that, you might be able to ask them. Okay. So, and then finally, this is the kind of the big question, 15 marks. And they talk about sports logos because there's been a lot of discussion, and I think even this text may have been written before this. Really, a couple of years ago, there was quite a lot of talk about sports logos, and some of the pretty, what most people, a lot of people, some people consider to be quite racist sports logos and names. And um, some governing bodies for sports have changed it. There's I think a basketball league that required the teams to change their names, and that's it, end of it. But there are some teams that maintain these kind of maybe logos that are offensive to a lot of people, and they don't seem to be interested in changing. Okay, so they're just going to ask you to assign a letter from the following list to each of the team names in the columns below. Okay, so for example, you say it, so Indians. Okay, that's probably an Aboriginal people, so you put AB there. Lions, that's an animal, so A. Ducks, that's an animal. Yankees, that's actually political. Senators, again, political. Okay, so you get the idea, right? So they're just asking you to do that, And then down below it says, answer the following questions. What is the common purpose of team logos? Okay, what's the point of a team logo? Okay, you think of the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Canadians or the Ottawa Senators. They got a lot of grief for their logo when it first was published. Um, when the team was formed. Um, so what types of images do the various logos depict? Types can include humorous, powerful, intimidating, ironic, regal, swift, wild. Okay. So you're just going to answer those questions. That's probably just a few lines there. And then discuss whether sports logos should be regulated any further than they are. For instance, it is illegal to use profanity in a logo. Are there any other cases in which a logo should be prohibited and why? So, they're not really saying to talk about the Aboriginal names, the kind of the insulting names or the insulting logos, but you could certainly talk about that. And if you do a Google search on that, racist team names, I'm sure you'll get lots of information because there's been a lot of discussion about that in recent years. And for some reason, these teams just don't want to change. And, I really don't understand it, but, they're, it's really hard to understand. But then if they have to be told their names are racist and their logos are demeaning, then it's probably, if they have to be told that, then they probably can't understand it anyway. So what do you say? If you were king of the world, would you make these teams, make it illegal for them to have, demeaning logos or insulting team names, right? That's, I guess, the question, and then explain your reasoning for it. Okay. So that's it for key question 7. Hopefully that made that clear. Okay. So I wouldn't expect you to spend a lot of time on that. Probably the reading for the first quote, and maybe some of the reading might take a little bit of time, but I wouldn't expect you to spend, not hours, an hour or so, maybe 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. It depends on how fast you work, something like that. Okay, if it's taking you much longer than that, you probably need to talk to me, and we'll sort it out and see if I can help you get through them a little faster. Okay. All right. Well, with that, then let's turn to lesson 8. Now, lesson 8 is it's about roles and responsibilities. So we're going to talk about family, community, and nation. Okay, and it's kind of interesting that in the news the last couple of days on CBC there was a story about. There's been a couple of stories about parenting, and it's not specific to First Nations, but it interests me because it opens up some questions. One was a few weeks ago. Maybe a man, no, actually, no, it was recently. Anyway, a man, apparently his son was running around on their front lawn, nice first day of spring, and he's 4 years old. And the kid took his clothes off and was, I don't know, running through the sprinkler or something like that. So somebody called the police, and they came to his house and were quite intimidating about the fact that this little boy was running around naked, 4 years old, on the front lawn. At least that's what the man understood. Now, it's since been clarified that the police were not at all concerned about the nudity or nakedness of the little child. It was more of they had been told that he was running on the street. Okay, but at first it seemed that the police just, a neighbor just called the police and reported that this kid was running around naked, and the police immediately went and confronted the family. So, the questions that raises is, we think of parenting as kind of a responsibility for not just the parents, but maybe also the neighbors as well. But then how, something like that where it's more of a value judgment, right? This guy doesn't see anything wrong with it. A lot of people don't see anything wrong with it. Some people do. And then when they call the police come and say, yeah, no letting your kid run around naked. Your 4-year-old kid run around naked on your front lawn. So that does open up some questions, right? Because we want our neighbors to be looking out for our kids. At least, I think, in my community we do, my neighborhood. right? I look out for the kids that are in the neighborhood. But, you know, at what point does a parent say, mind your own business? And are there communities, are there places where really the parent just wants to be the sole parent and, you know, everyone else should just leave the kid alone? Okay, so that's really what we're going to talk about. There was another one where the man put his dropped his kid off at a store, a toy store, and the kid was 11 and a half, and the kid had some money, and he went into the store, and he was going to buy something in the store, and then meet his father later in the mall. And the store actually asked the kid how old he was, and when he said 11 and a half, they detained him, and they wouldn't let him leave until the father came. So again, that's, you know, the father is trying to parent in his way, which is to give the kid a more and more responsibility. And then, you know, the people in the store said, no, you can't do that, right? The kid has to be 12 before he's allowed to be alone. So again, you know, there's no easy answers because we want people to look out for kids, right? We do, but we also want to have our own roles and responsibilities. So with that in mind, let's see what the course material has to say. Now, the first thing we have here, of course, it always gives you your learning goals. Now, the keywords, what I've been doing up till now most of the time is defining these words for you. But I just left this up to you now. There's three of them. So diaspora, okay, pipe carrier, you may actually be in a better position to define that one yourself, and elder as well. Another, right? Because if I try to define elder for you, chances are I'm not going to get it, right? Because I have an idea of what an elder is, but it's from my worldview, right? And my worldview is different. I grew up in, well, rural Ottawa. Okay, and the same as pipe carrier. That's not really something I'm terribly familiar with. So I'll leave that for you to define. And hey, if you get some good definitions, you're welcome to post it. You can post it on my Facebook page, just on my timeline or in a message to me. If you'd like to do that, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, no right or wrong answers there. So let's see what. um, so I guess my opening question here is, how are the roles and responsibilities determined in your family? Okay, so now if you're an adult, right, and you have kids, you have a partner, whatever, how are those roles defined? Who's in charge of what? Okay, so a good example is with our daughter who's off and married herself now. I think that it was pretty obvious from early on that my spouse, my wife, was the disciplinarian, just because, like, absolutely, I mean, I couldn't discipline her at all. I couldn't say no to her. She'd go out shopping, and she'd basically have all my money. So certainly my wife was the disciplinarian. So, but that role was very clear, and I don't think we really discussed that. It just happened. That's just the way it evolved, right? That's her skill. She does it. Okay. Now, in our family now, what do we do? Well, I look after our retirement planning. I do all of our retirement planning, and I got everything lined up. Okay. I take care of all that stuff. My spouse takes care of our real estate investments, right? And we buy and sell houses every once in a while, and so she takes care of that. Okay, now, and it's because she has that skill. Okay, so the question is, do you ever sit down and talk about that, or does it just kind of happen, or is it just something that's expected in your community? Right? So is it just something that, the man always does whatever, the woman always does something else, or so that's the question. Okay. So, at this point we would have a discussion, but if you're watching this on video or on the in the archive, just think about it yourself, and how are those roles and responsibilities determined? Okay. So Now here's what it says in the course material. Okay, and excuse me. And remember that um, I've been critical of a text before, the course text, because they use absolutes rather than most or many. They tend to just say this is the way it is. So when you're reading this, keep in mind that you're perfectly it's perfectly appropriate for you to say, well, that's not really the case in my community, or for me, or for my family. So keep that in mind. They're saying stuff as if it's always true. Probably is most of the time, but it's not always 100%. So here's an example on page um, going to be page 15 of the text. I don't even think there's a page number on it. Anyway, so it says the family is the utmost importance for Aboriginal people. Okay, the family is of the utmost importance for Aboriginal people. The mainstream's concept of the nuclear family, which includes parents and children only, does not always apply to the social constructs of Aboriginal families. Rather, many extended family members, such as aunts, uncles, and cousins, play significant roles in supporting, strengthening, encouraging, and nurturing all family members. This extensive support system helps to explain the source of strength that sustains many Aboriginal nations. Okay, so again, ask yourself, is that really true for your family? Okay. And this is not necessarily when they talk about the nuclear family, I know lots and lots of families in the South that have extended, their extended families, right? They have, the kids live at home even after they get married, for example, and they all form one big family. Now that could be a little awkward in some cultures, but in others it's the normal thing, right? And I also, I know some in some cultures they don't even really have a word for aunt, because basically all of the mother's sisters are mothers, right? So basically the child has a whole bunch of mothers, has a whole bunch of fathers on the brother's side, okay, or the father's brothers. Okay, so and that's a tradition in a lot of different cultures, not necessarily First Nation. Okay, so the first question then, it says, give examples of good, healthy, respectful relationships in your life. Okay, so let's think about that. Actually, we want to look at the course text too, but think about good, healthy, respectful relationships in your life. Okay, so you know, and it certainly could be parent and child, whatever that could be it. With your partner, possibly, right? With your for your teachers, if you're still taking classes, do you have a good, respectful relationship with your teachers? Okay, that's usually a good, respectful relationship. It should be. Grandparents, your friends, right? And that's really important. You have respectful relationships with your friends, and it's an important part of our lives to have good, respectful relationships. Let's take a look at the course text and see what they have to say about these about relationships. Okay. So this is page 144 in the course text, and so they talk about roles and responsibility. Okay, and there's a poem right at the beginning here. Let's see if I can zoom in on that poem. All right. I'll give this a try. This is a poem called From Nokum is My Teacher by David Bouchard. And it says, will you walk with me, grandmother? Will you talk with me a while? I'm finding life confusing, and I'm looking for some answers to questions all around me, at that school and on the street. You've always been here for me. Will you help me learn to see? Grandmother, should the answer to some questions not be sought within your heart? Okay, so that's kind of profound, and little unexpected, isn't it? Right? At least from my worldview, I'd kind of expect grandma to dish out some sage wisdom, right? To have, the top 10 things that every person should know. Life's Little Instruction Book, I think that was a very popular book for a while, where it sort of gives you some advice. So in this case, though, what it's saying is that the grandmother's saying, don't ask me, look inside you. Okay, so not really sure what um, and I think that probably the grandmother has some other advice there, but that's some of it. So it says here the chapters. Trying to get this to scroll here. The chapters focus on roles and responsibilities in families, communities, and nations. So we're going to first talk about families. Okay, and let's just move on here. Some nice artwork here, and it's kind of showing some. Yeah, very nice. Okay, so you can see those in the course text. Okay. Now, it says that we already looked at identity, realities, and perception. So stereotypes, which is we spent quite a bit of time on that. And then it says this, and I think this is what I was trying to get at earlier. It says, as you read, keep in mind that people and nations are incredibly diverse. Just as there is diversity in your community, you will find this diversity many times over among many families, communities, and nations of Aboriginal peoples in Canada. In other words, this chapter presents common themes, selected roles, and specific examples, but it cannot possibly do justice to the diversity found among First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples today. Okay, so that's what I was really trying to say when the course material says, this is the way. It Now they're qualifying it in the textbook by saying, yeah, it's the way we see it, but it's not necessarily universal. Okay. So it says key understandings about identity and groups. So here I think the author of the text is going to explain to you what their worldview is, their vision is. Okay. So it says, before you look in depth at identity in families, communities, and nations, here are some key points to consider. So this should be on page 146. It says, a common theme among First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people is concern for the group, family, community, and nation, and a focus on relationships. The group is a vital aspect of identity. For example, Maiawichi to win. Maiawichi to win? Means in Plains Creek, good, healthy, happy, respectful relationships. These relationships are highly valued. This focus on the group and on relationships sometimes contrasts sharply with the focus on the individual often found in Canadian society. Now you see, I would object to that. That's really okay. See, okay, I challenge that because I think Canadians certainly are among some of the most socially conscious people around. And I've certainly lived down in the United States where, yeah, individual identity is quite important. Not being concerned about the group is not uniquely Canadian, but it certainly, I think it's a very strong thing. We're very socially conscious in Canada. Anyway, so there you go. So I've critiqued the text. You may actually find it different, from your point of view. Anyway, let's just move on here. It says, however, while these two foci contrast, that's the 2 points of view, they cannot be separated. They are connected, as the quotation at the left illustrates. Okay, so they want us to read this. Well, let's just take a little aside and read that. It says, the process of healing must be based on our traditional spiritual values of respect, pride, dignity, sharing, hospitality, and mutual aid. Self-reliance begins with the individual, then is built by the family, then by the community, and finally by our relations with other nations. Okay? All right. So then it goes on to say that within the Aboriginal worldviews, each person sees his or her path through life as a cycle of responsibilities to family, community, nation, and the wider world. For First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, people roles for any other person, and Inuit people, roles for any one person are not static, and roles are all interrelated to other people, to the land, and to animals. The ideas of community and nationhood are not confined to geographical location. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people live everywhere, on reserves and off reserves, in small towns and cities, and in large urban centers. The sense of being Anishinaabe, or Inuit, or Cree, or Dene is not necessarily tied to living in the physical community of one's ancestors. One is just as Métis, Dakota, or Onondaga, whether living in Curve Lake, Winnipeg, or Oshawa. Aboriginal identity transcends geographical and spatial frontiers. The continued displacement of First Nations peoples from ancestral lands, among other factors, has led to diasporas. Okay, so here we go. Diaspora, the dispersion of a people, from the Greek word for scatter. Okay, so that's what it means. So they're talking about diasporas of First Nations people. You go to a community, and I might ask, well, how many people are in the community, right? And the person will say, well, this many, but there's twice that many, but in the band, but the others left. The others live somewhere else. Okay, and I hear that a lot, right? They'll tell me how many people there are in the band, and they say, but only half of them live here, or only a third of them live here. Okay, so that's where Aboriginal people is spread out. Okay, and so what they're trying to say is you are your identity, whether you're in your community or whether you're in Ottawa or any other place. Okay, now yesterday I talked about, I think it was yesterday, I talked about the education being a great neutralizer for people uh, looking at others as different, right? Once you get to a certain level of a school, then they don't really care, where you're from or what you look like. They just care that you are what you're capable of doing. That's what they care about. Doesn't mean that you're not First Nation, right? When I go to school, it doesn't mean that I'm not, from the Ottawa Valley. It just means that it doesn't matter, right? It's not good or bad. It just doesn't matter, right? It's what you bring to the learning environment, what you bring to the table, right? And for some employers, it's the same thing, right? You go there, and it doesn't matter who you are, and you just, or what you look like, or anything. You just, it's what you can do for the company, okay? And that's a strange thing. I remember going to, the first time I went to a company, a high-tech company, and I go in there, and there were some people, so very crazy looking outfits, right? And I was taught, I grew up and I was taught you had to kind of dress conservatively, and and it's like people just just wore whatever they wanted, whatever made them feel comfortable, and it was sometimes pretty crazy stuff, and they had different colored hair, and they had all sorts of back then. uh, not that conservative. And the point is that when I got to that company, what I found out was that nobody cared. Nobody cared what you looked like. They didn't even care how long you stayed at work. What they cared about was what you did, right? You'd go to work, do some stuff, and if it was valuable, then they really didn't care. If you only were there a few hours a day, or if you were there for 24 hours, it didn't matter. So that's, but it doesn't mean that you leave your identity at home. It just means that it doesn't matter in some cases. So let's take a look at what they, okay, so we're on to the next little bit here, and they're talking about the four hills of life. Let's sort of flip back to the course material, and they actually ask us to read this, The Four Hills of Life. Okay? And then respond. So let's see what they have to say. So The Four Hills of Life is an um, Anishinaabe teaching uh, that describes a sacred journey through life that every person undertakes. Every stage of life, from childhood to adolescence to adulthood to old age, has its own set of responsibilities and challenges, which are represented by the four hills. Each of the four hills or stages can also be described as a season. During each stage, we must rise to meet our responsibilities and challenges, or using the image of the four hills, we must reach the peak of the hill. So it says springtime represents birth and childhood. The first challenge is overcoming the difficulty of being born. I'm fighting against childhood illnesses, or illnesses. Given that they come into the world helpless, infants must also learn to ask for help. Basically, an infant is responsible only for being someone's baby. Now, as summer comes, a person enters a stage of youth. Although there is time for fun and play, youth are responsible for learning about the world around them and preparing for their adult roles. In autumn, each person begins to climb the third hill or enter the phase of adulthood. Increasing responsibilities may include nurturing and providing for their own families as they become parents in their turn. Winter comes and snow covers the ground as each person prepares to climb the fourth hill. And if individuals at this stage have followed the good path and have learned many lessons throughout their previous stages, then they will fulfill the role of teacher. Because of their life experience, people at the fourth stage can serve as guides to those who are not as far along on their journey. The circle is complete when the physical body dies. The circle continues as new life comes into the world again. Okay, so that's an interesting take on what's also called the cycle of life. Um, so I guess my first question would be: is that something that you've heard? Have you heard something similar? Do you have that belief in your nation, in your community? Okay, let's go back to the. Keep in mind that I do have. I'm going to put these slides up, the course material, so you can read that again if you want to go through it. Okay. So it says support question, and this will be on page 16 of the Unit 2. It says reflect on the four hills of life teaching and make a list showing how it is illustrated by examples in this chapter. Okay. So I think that they're looking at the different roles and responsibilities. Yeah, you'll have to go through the chapter and see. Yeah, so they talk about it. Community roles on page 135, elders and wisdom keepers, things like that. So, but just reflect on it. That would be the thing to me. You could write a paragraph. How does it resonate with you? Does it make sense? Does it really not make sense? Is it something you've heard? Do you agree with it? Do you think it really is like that or not? Remember, we're not looking for agreement or disagreement. We're just looking for your reflection. How does it fit you? Right? Right? So try it on. How does it fit you? That's really what we're asking in that question. That's what a reflection is. Okay, so don't be afraid of saying, disagreeing with it, right? Or agreeing with it. Don't try and guess what I think, because really it's for you. That's what a reflection is. Okay? And then for question 3, it says, where do you think you are in the seasons? Explain why you think you are there. Consider 3 other people, one from each season, and explain why you believe they're in that season. So, if you think about your friends, your family, community members, you can probably come up with something like that. Okay, so, and remember, this is for you. I mean, obviously, if you want to send these to me and have me look at them, I'd be happy to do that and give you some feedback. But this is an activity for you in order to help you understand the course material, right? It's like if we explain how to do something, explaining it is one thing, but actually doing it is something else. And this is we're asking you to do something here after we've explained some stuff. And then finally, key question 4, it says, in one paragraph, reflect on how you think that having a large extended family for extra family support helps to make the world a better place. Okay, well, again, they're saying explain how it helps to make the world a better place. If you think it doesn't, please don't feel that you have to, disagree with your own view. Okay, so just reflect on what you think the importance of having a large family is. Maybe you don't think it's important at all. Okay, and or maybe you think it's very important. Whatever. Just one paragraph. Okay, so I want to emphasize that because, sometimes you may get the impression that we're trying to make you think a certain way. What we're trying to do is make you think about stuff. We're giving you a lot of ideas and asking you to think about them. Okay, not necessarily a certain way. Okay. All right. Now, it says here historically the extended family, and I think this is actually this is where they got that from the course text. Um, they got this from the course text. Okay. And what they're seeing, and it's kind of interesting, it would have been impossible to subsist on the land without everybody working together. Every member of the family had an important role to fulfill, and everyone was expected to contribute to the general welfare of the family. Often, family needs were put ahead of individual desires. Young mothers and fathers were often busy securing and preparing food. Parenting was traditionally undertaken by members of the extended family. Children also learned from other members of the community with special skills, such as traditional plant knowledge or artistic abilities. The education of children was both a family and a community responsibility. Okay? Now, they're talking about that tradition in First Nations communities. So, let me sharing here, as someone born in Ottawa, kind of raised more or less in the Ottawa Valley, I was raised by my maternal grandmother from as young as I can remember. I was probably an infant up until I was 10. I was raised by my maternal grandmother. So, this is not necessarily just First Nation communities. This is a worldview of a lot of families where people help. In my case, my mother was not capable of caring for me. She had her problems, and while she was getting those problems resolved, my grandparents stepped in. Right, my grandmother, my grandfather, and a lot of who I am is a result of watching my grandfather. He was a handyman. He fixed anything. You name it, he fixed it. I saw him fill a pothole once in the apartment complex that he managed. There was a pothole. He went, he got some asphalt, and he tapped it in there, and he fixed this pothole. I've seen him fix electrical outlets, and seen him fix plumbing, and he just seemed to know how to do everything, and I just watched him. That's what I did. He didn't really teach me. He didn't say very much. Very quiet guy. But he taught me by just letting me watch him. A lot of grandparents might say, get out of here, kid. Just go away, right? But he didn't. He didn't say anything. He just let me watch him. Took me everywhere. So this is a way of raising kids, right? Now we think more traditionally, the mother, the father, they teach the kids or whatever. But what they're saying here is that historically, the young parents were actually, needed to prepare food and to help the community get enough food in the good weather for the tough weather. So, other members of the family maybe it didn't have quite as much, couldn't go out as much, would then take on looking after the kids. Okay. So, now does that still happen today? That's a question, and we're sort of asking you kind of to reflect on that. What are the roles today, right? Is it still the traditional roles? Now, the next thing then is the let's see. Okay, yeah, we already answered. We had asked a question and didn't really spend a lot of time on it. It was where was it here? Oh yeah, give examples of good, healthy, respectful relationships in your life. So I did ask you to think about that, and just think about that. You don't really even have to answer right away. Just think about who are the healthy relationships, and of course, that any unhealthy relationships is maybe something to also think about, because it's important to have healthy relationships. All right. Now the next thing we're gonna talk about and see how we're doing. Hey, yeah, we're actually doing pretty well. So page 16, the bottom of page 16, we talk about community roles, elders and wisdom keepers. So this is, of course, if you're thinking about um, the Four Hills, then with that model and the wisdom keepers in winter, right? Of course. So communities choose their elders and wisdom keepers by following in their path and seeking them for knowledge. In your community, who is involved in helping you develop your potential? What ideas do you have about parenting or mentoring the young? How would these ideas help develop a child's potential? Okay. So there you are, right? So that is part of uh, one of the roles, right? Or sorry, that is one of the roles, elders and wisdom keepers. Let's see what the course text has to say. Okay, so this is on page 155. So let's just go there. Now I skipped a whole bunch of pages. I didn't really skip them. We're just going to sort of flip forward and, whoops, there we go. There it is. Yeah, so when they ask you to go through the text and find examples, there's elders and wisdom keepers in a few pages back. There's um, a section for young people. Let's see, what's it say? Um, and yeah, so there's different sections to talk about the different roles. Okay. All right. So what the course text then tells us is that called by a variety of names in different nations, people known as elders, wisdom keepers, cultural advisors, and medicine people take on many key roles. In general, we use the term elders and wisdom keepers in this textbook. Elders and wisdom keepers include both men and women, and they are not necessarily elderly people. They are people who have learned the traditional teachings and ways of life of their communities, share them with their community, have special gifts, or have had unique life. Okay, so have special gifts or have had a unique life. Okay, and in some places, not necessarily First Nations, but for example, a young person who goes away, maybe they go live abroad for a year, right? Or they go live in another country for a year, or maybe they go to university, or maybe they go, to take to you know they do something special and unique, and then when they come back, they're looked at as being special, and people go to them for advice, and people listen to their stories. They're not necessarily old, right? So I think that's what they're kind of talking about here, that sort of thing. So it says from the earliest age, children are taught to show respect to elders and wisdom keepers because of their wisdom and knowledge and their readiness to share them with others. It is important to note that the role of elders and wisdom keepers does not exist in isolation. Being a trusted member of a community is part of the role. Okay? In Cree communities, elders may have specialized knowledge. They might be spiritual advisors who keep sacred knowledge and know protocols, healers who know ancient medicines and conduct sweats, or community elders who hold and pass forward the nation's traditional knowledge. In Métis communities, the term used is elders. The Métis roles of elder and senator are different, although some community members may fulfill both roles. The role of senator is an elected position. Both senators and elders play important roles in maintaining Métis culture. And then the description of elder among the Innu, it says elders should be role models for everyone else. Elders should be teachers to the grandchildren and all young people because of their wisdom. Elders should be advisors, lawgivers, dispensers of justice. Elders should be open to everyone. Elders should be knowledgeable in all aspects of Innu culture. Elders should be teachers of the history of Innu people and recorders of history. Elders should be teachers of values important to Innu to be passed from generation to generation, of language and oral history of Innu medicine. We place great importance in our elders. Their directions for us will guide our lives. So this is, it says, a statement by Innu delegation from Shishatshu, Native Canadian Centre of Toronto. Shishatshu. Okay, I try. If you know how to pronounce it, let me know in the comments. The video, if you're on YouTube, send me a note on my Facebook page or something like that. I really do want to pronounce things properly. So here's a question that I have for you, and this is just a question. Do elders resolve disputes, right? Is that something that elders would normally do, right? Do they resolve disputes in your community? Or, if somebody's troubled, would an elder, would their family take them to an elder to talk to them? Is that the role of an elder? Okay, so that's a question I have. So is that something? And the other thing, I'm going to point this out because the text doesn't really talk about this. It might be a bit of a difficult topic, but very often when an elder is asked to say something, very, very often, it's a Christian prayer, right? Very often they'll go up and they'll say a prayer either in their language or in English. So that's another thing. Are the elders also keepers of community's faith? Even may not be traditional, but is that a role that elders have now? Okay, it doesn't really say this in the course text. My observation seems to be that it happens quite a bit, that the elder is also sort of a religious leader as well. Okay. All right. So let's, okay. So now you see here, they talk about the roles and responsibilities. So we've looked at elders, and then there's children and youth, and teachers and learners. So there are different roles. Caregivers of life, caregivers, providers. So we can look at all of those, and I think we should probably start wrapping things up here. So we do have some time to work on this on Monday, okay? And we'll just wrap up this lesson on Monday, and then we'll move on to lesson 9, which we're going to learn all about residential schools and kind of what happened there. Okay, so just to emphasize then, we're asking you to think and reflect about the course material and not necessarily trying to sway you to a point of view. If you disagree with some of the statements when it asks you to reflect them, feel free to say you disagree with it. I assure you it's not going to affect your mark, right? Or anything like that. All right. Now, there's no class on Friday, so we'll meet again on Monday. And I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday.